Before the Throne of Atlantis crossover, author Jeff Johns largely structured the book to explore threats to the surface world that came from the depths. We saw the Trench attack Beachfront, we saw Atlanteans attack for custody of the A-glyph, we saw Black Manta attack the others, we saw Atlantis attack Boston. The surface world, our world, was the good one, and the ocean represented the unknown and the dangerous, the bad world. But Johns has swapped status quos as we go into Aquaman issue 17. Arthur has given up the surface world and his dream of standing guard between the two worlds, to safeguard the oceans. Yes, part of his motivation for doing so is to protect the surface world from the ongoing potential threat of Atlantis, who were just promised war, retribution, and they are a group of people who just saw their people killed in an attack orchestrated by Volko. They were forced back from victory when Arthur unseated Orm, but that doesn't mean they're happy about it. As their returned king, Arthur must now keep them in line, but somehow still make them happy, or who knows what they'll do to him. So issue 17 opens with two large whaling ships doing what they do, killing whales. They've almost slaughtered the entire pod, save for one, and they are preparing to do just that, until a small set of speedboats race into the scene. These are the Sea Devils, who are either activists or terrorists, depending on who you ask. Their leader, a brunette male named Dane Dorrance, shouts over a megaphone that they're breaking international law and that they need to stop their activities. The authorities are already on their way. The captain of the whaling ship knows that the authorities were well bribed, though. No one is coming. He orders his men to shoot the devils. On the deck of their ship, a large cannon that looks like it's made of crab shell begins to charge. Dane's partner, a blonde woman named Judy, sees the weapon and shouts at Dane, asking what that is. The hum increases and the cannon is about to fire, and then Aquaman's trident sinks into the barrel. The cannon explodes. As the crew recover and stare through the smoke and dust, Aquaman and a squad of Atlantean warriors rise up out of the water. The squad is made up of men and women, some of them wearing purple and gray armor, very reminiscent of Orm's costume, while the others wear gold. Their weapons vary from laser pistols to hooked spears to swords. The wave that they are riding on tips over, dumping onto the front of the boat hard enough to tilt the entire ship. The crew, which had just been getting back on their feet and picking up their guns, is knocked over and scattered once again. Now standing on the deck, Aquaman walks over to the captain. As he approaches, we see the Sea Devils climbing on board as well. Dane warns them to keep back from the Atlanteans. As the captain of the vessel picks up his pistol, Aquaman warns him to leave it. He's done here. The man tries to argue. He has permits. Aquaman agrees. Sure, you've got permits. Permits to hunt a specific quota, not what you feel like. You have no right, the captain shouts. Because, honestly, legally, Aquaman doesn't. But he does have force. Aquaman picks up the captain with one hand and pulls his face in close. I have every right, he says, because these are my oceans, and you're trespassing. No, please, don't! Just past Aquaman, we hear another of the hunters crying out. He drops the captain, and we turn to see a big, bulky Atlantean with a sword arm about to run the hunter through. Arthur grabs that sword arm, stopping it, warning this guy that they are not here to kill anyone. The warrior, who is named Murk, M-U-R-K, turns. Why? They're using the Atlanteans' own weapons against them. What does he care about what happens to them? Another warrior steps in, warning Murk that he shouldn't question the king, dude. Why not? Murk asks. Orm was always willing to explain his commands. So should he, Murk says, gesturing at Aquaman. This is where Aquaman asks Murk his name. And he not only gives it, but he also gives his resume, too. Murk is leader of the Men of War, frontline army of the great nation of Atlantis. He trained in the fire pits. He is the lone survivor of that class, all so that he could protect the kingdom from the evils of man. Today the sea is red with blood of the sacred singers, by which he means the whales. If they let these humans live, he says, they will return to kill again, like they always do. Aquaman assures him that this time, that won't happen. These men will be arrested and imprisoned for their crimes. But Merc doesn't trust humans to police their own. Arguing that not all humans are profiteers, he gestures to the Sea Devils. They came to help, he points out, to protect the whales. And now Merc just sneers. They have no weapons, and they have no army. They would have been slaughtered like the singers were. Who even are they? Dane Dorrance introduces himself and his companions, Judy and Nick Walton. Arthur knows of them. He heard that they brought down an oil rig that was under construction last month, right? Dane holds up a finger. They allegedly did that, thank you. No one has proven anything. Some people call the Sea Devils eco-terrorists, Aquaman says. Yeah, and some people call the Atlanteans terrorists too, Dane replies. And they have proof of that claim. Aquaman holds up a hand. Mr. Dorrance, you should go, he says. We'll tow the boats in and bring the dead to the ocean floor. Don't worry about this. But Dane doesn't believe him. Does Aquaman honestly expect them to trust the same Atlanteans that just attacked the eastern seaboard and killed hundreds of people? As far as Dane is concerned, the Atlanteans are no better than these whalers. They're all killers. And I get that, Arthur starts to say, but Dane cuts him off. This isn't a misgiving about the Atlanteans, my man. It is a hard fact. Dane and his friends have spent years fighting to protect these oceans. They have the scars to prove it, and they have lost friends in this fight. 2 of the devils died rescuing people during your Atlantean war, Dane says, jabbing a finger at Arthur. First you fight against the Atlanteans, now you're fighting with them? Whose side are you on? A sudden explosion rocks the deck between them. Everybody is fine, just rattled, and Arthur turns, shouting at Merc, "What the hell is wrong with you?" His good hand is holding up a laser pistol. The human was getting too close to you, Merc states. That is never wise. Aquaman stares him down. Don't attack anyone like that in my presence. If I need your help, I'll ask for it. I have saved King Orm's life many times, from fire trolls and the Deep Six. I would have died for him. We would have all died for him. Merc's scarred face grins. But the next time you need help, I will wait for you to request it, sir. Arthur stares at Merc for a moment, challenging his attitude. And then the Atlanteans begin to clean things up. Arthur jumps into the water, swimming down next to the surviving whale. Cyborg cuts in over Arthur's League communicator. Waller has spoken to the president, and she wants to meet as soon as possible. Arthur rests a hand on the whale, looking into its eye. Then it swims away, and Aquaman dives deeper into the dark. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 26.16 of Aquaman. Who are you fighting for? I love that Johns has absolutely flipped Aquaman's life around, but how little of his life has actually changed. There's some great dramatic irony here. The eco-terrorists/activists don't trust him because he doesn't do enough to help humanity. The whalers don't like him because not only is he stopping them, but, Arthur exists outside of the system that they are used to exploiting. They know who to bribe and how to game the system. You can't do that with a hero like Aquaman. Merc, and by extension the Atlanteans who agree with him, don't like Arthur because he isn't Atlantean or hardcore enough. Land or sea, Arthur gets no respect. We can actually see this demonstrated on Arthur's face, because for the first time in Aquaman's 2011 history, he's got facial hair. I guess razors just don't work underwater. It's not a lot, it's just like a 5 o'clock shadow, but it's the first time we've seen him with facial hair at all. What's important about this is that it indicates that Arthur is letting his personal grooming go a little bit right now. Maybe he's overwhelmed by the responsibilities of being king. Maybe he's mourning everything that he lost at the end of the Throne of Atlantis crossover. Maybe he's just busy. Clearly, I haven't shaved, and it's just because it takes time. But what it indicates is that Arthur is fraying at the edges, demonstrating that although his life hasn't really changed all that much, he is still caught in a battle between land and sea. What has changed within that structure is weighing on him as a person. I also love the complicated nature of these relationships that Johns is showing us. By almost anyone's moral scale, Arthur did the right thing here. For the Sea Devils, though, he didn't do enough. For the Atlanteans, he didn't do enough. Johns is establishing the ideals and motives of the surface world and the ocean world in these characters in this moment. Neither side trusts the other, and neither side respects Aquaman. He even said in Justice League issue 17 that he needs to find a way to bridge the two worlds in order to help them heal. And now we can see exactly how far apart those two worlds are. The Sea Devils are an established part of DC continuity, which is something that I did not know going into this arc. I doubt that I looked them up the first time that I read this comic when it originally was published, but they've all got full names and they've got the cute team name, so I did a quick Google and yep, they have existed since 1960, launched in the title Showcase, where they were for 3 issues before they went on to get their own ongoing series, which, that's not bad. That ran for 35 issues total, which is pretty impressive for a group of relatively normal humans just going on weird adventures. Consisting of Dane Dorrance, Judy and Nick Walton, and another man named Biff Bailey. They were your kind of classic team of sci-fi / comic book adventurers just going on water-based adventures. They did appear off and on over the years in other DC titles or events, but like most of these non-superheroes from the Golden and Silver Age of comics, they've never really regained their significance again. But, to me, it makes perfect sense to just kind of adopt them into Aquaman's story as either allies, enemies, or rivals, maybe a little bit of all three. I don't remember them sticking around in the rest of Geoff Johns' run, but honestly, I would love to see it, or I'd love to see it happen again. I love the self-granted authority that Dane has when he's talking to Arthur. We've seen cops and army officials interact with Aquaman, and they have definitely talked down to him like he's a child, treating him like he's unnecessary in whatever situation they're in. But Dorrance talks to Aquaman like he's a nuisance. And Dorrance is just a generalized member of the public. He is someone who would know of Aquaman because of his actions with the Justice League, which have all been positive for the most part, up until the most recent Justice League story arcs. This is the most well-respected super team on the planet, and Dane just told a member of them to go take a swim. Those are some beach ball-sized cojones, and I really appreciate that in just a normal human dude, right? Conversely, we also meet Merc in this scene, who represents the old guard, quite literally. Merc is a guy who knows how to do his job, and he has done his job for years, and he's good at his job. But suddenly, he has to deal with a shift in management and a completely different management style. I have been Merc, and so I'm not gonna lie, I kinda love Merc. I love his cocky attitude, calling out Arthur's plan and questioning it right to his face. When Merc talks about Orm explaining himself, notice that he doesn't say King Orm, just Orm, like they're equals, highlighting the point that Orm would go to the effort of explaining his thinking, bridging the gap between a soldier and his king. But later on, when Arthur tells Merc not to interfere in his fights, Merc says that King Orm trusted him, this time highlighting the difference in their station. That he wasn't just a soldier, he was a soldier trusted by the king. That's how good he is at what he does. Merc might be an ugly soldier, but he's not a brainless one. This is a guy to watch. He is also a bit of an ugly cuss, with scar tissue pulling at the right side of his face. His mouth is always pulled partially open, and his right eye maybe appears to be missing. Maybe it's sealed shut. It's hard to tell because of the fin-shaped helmet that he has on. This does make for a nice design contrast to the very handsome and picturesque Arthur, who is just your standard superhero levels of handsome. It also does kind of work as a visual shorthand that Merc is a bad guy, because traditionally non-heroic looking characters tend to be villains in comic books. So we'll see how Merc goes. He could be a rival that Arthur wins over, or he could be a threat that Arthur has to stop. We have seen that Geoff Johns likes to play against the physical body types and costuming of his villains in our last story arc, where everything about Orm screamed, "This is a bad guy," when everything was actually happening because of Volko, who looks like a kindly old man. Once we wrap up the boating scene, there is a brief one-page interlude as we change scenes. In it, we see a figure in a complicated, clunky-looking diving suit underwater. He looks at a glowing holographic map on his arm, and then he points ahead. A handful of other divers start to move forward, looking to scavenge more Atlantean weapons from the ocean floor. Now, I'm not sure on this, because again, I have read these, but this is the kind of detail that slips my attention after, 12 years of publication history. But I would swear that the partially lit face that we see inside the diving helmet of that suit kind of looks like Dr. Shin. And I hope it's not, because I like Dr. Shin as a sympathetic character more than I do as a villainous character, but Geoff Johns seems really intent to make the guy seem like an a-hole, so who knows. In snow-covered Washington, D.C., Arthur meets with Amanda Waller. After the Justice League lost their governmental liaison, Steve Trevor, to the Justice League of America, Waller was promoted to the role. She informs Arthur that those whalers aren't the only people using Atlantean weapons out there. The U.S. Navy caught a trafficker off of Somalia who was armed with an Atlantean cannon. Someone is gathering up these weapons and selling them. Arthur assures her that he is going to find whoever is doing this, and he's going to stop them. Waller sure hopes that he does. The world doesn't like Atlantis very much right now. If word got out that Atlantean weapons were being used in criminal activities worldwide, things would only get worse. Orm's trial will help, but giving the government a scapegoat isn't going to be enough to make up for all the damage that Atlantis did. Arthur bristles. Orm is not a scapegoat. He attacked the surface world, yes, but only because Volko manipulated everyone. He is the real culprit here. Sure, Waller says, and while he is being held in Atlantis, your brother is waiting on a death sentence. That makes Arthur pause. He thought that was off the table. Only if Orm pleaded guilty, which he hasn't, Waller responds. And even if he does plead guilty, that isn't going to swing the public's perception of Atlantis overnight anyways. The world doesn't recognize it as a state, or Arthur as their legal king. She's tried talking to the various heads of state, but there hasn't been any change in their opinions on that matter. Then it's time to stop talking, Arthur says. He'll show the world that Atlantis has the ability and desire to help. He'll win them over. Waller eyes him. And you're going to do that all alone? He nods. Without the League, yeah. No, that's not what she meant. She means Mara. According to her information, Mara isn't exactly friends with Atlantis on the best of days. Arthur stops walking. He leans on the railing of the bridge that they are on, and he says that he needs to get back. Into that water? Waller asks. The cold of it doesn't bother you? Arthur says that he's used to it. Before he goes, Waller tells him, I don't get you. The surface world doesn't trust you. Atlantis will never accept you. Who are you fighting for? Without a word, Arthur leaps into the air and dives into the waters of the Potomac River. Immediately, Waller pulls out her cell phone. She tells whoever is on the other end that now is the time. Mara is alone. This scene reinforces and explains what Arthur was doing in our opening scene. My first thought, when we first got to it, was that Arthur was doing what he's always done, policing the barrier between the ocean and the surface. But this conversation shows us that there's actually more to it than that. The Atlantean weapons that the whalers were using isn't a confined incident, and we have seen that somebody is finding them and selling them. So it looks like this is going to be our driving narrative for a bit, which honestly works just fine. It's an interesting idea. The leftover or lost weapons are a great concept, perfectly suited to an Aquaman story. It's also a great way to show that the Throne of Atlantis crossover had an impact not just on the publication of the comics or on Arthur's personal story, but on the entire world within the comics. These weapons are popping up everywhere, which means they can be a threat to anyone, and that's really bad press. Unfortunately for Arthur, man, he is not a PR dude. This is actually a really fascinating idea to me, and I like that Geoff Johns has set it up. When it comes to himself, Arthur has been shown to have very little regard for the opinions of others. We've seen this multiple times throughout the comics regarding everyone from normal Americans in a diner to military men to the opinions of the Justice League. But when it comes to Atlantis' public image, now Arthur cares. I think it's fairly obvious that he does so because there are lives on the line. If the surface world fears Atlantis, he knows that things for them can get much worse. He has been hunted, he has been attacked, he has been ridiculed relentlessly for years. But if Arthur can prove Atlantis' value, maybe he can protect them from all of that. And maybe the surface world will really accept them. You know, I have really grown to respect Arthur as a character and as an individual and as a hero during my time doing this breakdown. But Mr. Charismatic he is not. He has never been fully accepted by the surface world, so why would they accept an entire nation of people like him? A nation that just tried to destroy Boston, Metropolis, and Gotham City, no less. The idea of the surface world not acknowledging Atlantis as its own nation is another one of those ideas that just fascinates me on a mental exercise level. Because in theory, Atlantis really has a lot of power, right? In theory, it is the single largest nation on the planet. Water covers, 75% of the globe? Their technology far outstrips ours, and as they have demonstrated, they have quite the military advantage if you're living on a coastline. When you consider how much travel, leisure, and business is conducted on the ocean through boats and shipping lanes, plus fishing for food, plus fiber optic cables that we drop so we can have internet, oil drilling, sea farming, we surface dwellers need the ocean and its bounty a lot more than Atlantis needs us up here on the land polluting it. And if Atlantis ever figures that out, well, it's a good thing we have an Aquaman. We learn more about Orm's situation as well, and it isn't good. I think a large part of Arthur's motivation to prove Atlantis' worth is tied up with Orm's situation as well. If Arthur can de-escalate the public's mistrust of Atlantis, maybe he can keep them from killing his brother. Remember, we saw at the end of Justice League issue 17, when Arthur was talking with Mera, that he sympathizes with Orm. His brother was doing what he thought was right, what he thought a king should do in order to defend their nation, and Arthur clearly believes that Orm shouldn't be killed for it. Of course, this conversation isn't just a bit of pleasantry between colleagues. As a professional manipulator of people... Wait, hang on. This is the first time that we have seen Amanda Waller talk to Aquaman and establish the fact that she is an ongoing part of this book from here on out, isn't it? Yeah, the only other time that we've seen Waller in this book was when she was trying to recruit Black Manta to the Suicide Squad and he killed that prison guard. Well, okay. Well, that reframes this scene a little bit, right? Because as readers of just Aquaman up to this point, we don't have a lot of experience with Amanda Waller. We don't know this woman. We know that she wanted to recruit the Manta when we were at Belle Reve. We know that she is the liaison to the League now, and as such to Arthur, to some degree. She represents the government. But otherwise, we don't know shit.
No swearing.
If we did know
no swearing,
we would know that the Wall is a cold-hearted, intelligent, manipulative woman who can out-chess the best government agents out there. She is a master manipulator and never to be fully trusted. She is the kind of person who will break the law if it means helping her nation. She will kill you if it means helping America. Or she will get you killed, take your pick.
whatever's the most effective, to be quite honest. Case in point, a few issues ago, she was trying to work with known murderer Black Manta, and here she is, working with Arthur now, and the Justice League. Waller doesn't have morals.
Well, that's probably going a little bit too far. I would argue that Waller does have morals, but they are her morals. She does not ascribe to the morals of the broader society that she exists in, would kind of probably be how I would say that. Waller is someone who has goals, and she will do whatever it takes to make those goals a reality. Not that we know that, because Geoff Johns hasn't told us anything about this. This is one of those instances where Geoff Johns does a kind of a really bad job of introducing us to this character and establishing who she is and what her role in the book is going to be moving forward. Like, again, if you've only been reading Aquaman, you have no idea who this character is or what this stuff means. But if you've been reading, honestly, a lot of other DC books, sure, you're probably going to have a better idea. And normally I would applaud Johns for that kind of careful background writing, where if you understand who Waller is, you're going to get a lot more out of this scene. But this is like directly affecting the plot kind of stuff. Like when Waller calls whoever it is that she called about Mara, our next scene is dealing with the consequences of that phone call, which involve Mara. It's not like Waller's a background character. She's going to be an active force in this book, or at least it looks like she's going to be an active force based on what Geoff Johns is showing us in this scene. So this is a little weird to read. So we now jump to Amnesty Bay, where Mara is shopping at Rudy's again. Her new and seemingly only friend outside of Arthur, Jennifer, is tagging along instead of working, completely confused as to why Mara isn't with Aquaman right now. He's the king! She is his queen! They should be together! This is storybook stuff, man! Mara dismisses that idea, though, saying that it's complicated. They are interrupted by a news report. A news report? What small-town grocery store has an active TV on, just sitting there on above a coffee machine? What is this? What kind of store is this? That's weird. Convenient for author Geoff Johns, but that's weird experience otherwise. I don't walk into Publix or Target or Walmart and they have a TV on. Anyways, so the news comes on and reports that 3 whales... excuse me. The news comes on and reports that 3 whales are dead after a skirmish between Atlantean forces and some local fishing groups. She mentions the sea devils, but not the illegal fishing, or illegal weapons, or the good work that Atlantis put in. That really quickly went from news reporter to Jerry Seinfeld, and I don't know why. There is, in the news story, in fact, no mention of Aquaman or of Atlantis' heroism at all. While Mara is distracted, someone calls her name. She turns around to find a number of police officers arrayed against her, weapons already drawn. They need her to come down to the station. That is a nice callback to issue 5, where Mara left, let's put it politely, police custody mostly because she didn't think that she did anything wrong when she broke Randy's arm when he sexually harassed her. But now there is no Arthur to bridge the gap between her and human society and human laws this time, or a world-ending threat to call her away for a couple weeks so she gets a pass. Much like Arthur, Mara isn't really a people person. It's actually one of the things that I like best about this couple is, like, together, they're happy and they like each other and they kind of complement each other really well. But you put them around anybody else and they're just like, what is wrong with you people? I kind of love it. That's some really cool drama going on, and I like the fact that Geoff Johns has not just forgotten the fact that Mara would have, like, an active legal situation going on that the characters just completely ignoring because that's just not how they do things in Atlantis. So is Mara going to go peacefully? Is Randy pressing charges, which really doesn't seem like a thing you want to do? Or will Mara risk running and return to the ocean, knowing that Atlantis doesn't want her any more than it wants Arthur? That's good stuff. Like, that's good, basic, simple storytelling. Like, that's got some high stakes for our characters and our cast without being the world's about to blow up. I really like that. Back in the ocean, we see Arthur swimming again. He finds a whale. The same one from the beginning of the issue, actually, the lone survivor. He pulls up alongside it, matching pace so that he can look into its eye. and he apologizes again. Then he stops and concentrates, summoning the attention of all nearby sea life. "I'm sorry I haven't been here for you," he says. "I won't fail you again." The humming that is Arthur's telepathic command echoes through the water. It reaches all the way to the Antarctic, bouncing down through icy tunnels until it stops in the dark. A dead figure seems to stagger out from the shadows. "King of the Seven Seas," he says, "how wrong you are." So there's two things happening here, right? Let's cover the second because it's the easiest and most obvious, the appearance of this icy, seemingly dead figure. Obviously, this is going to be an ongoing concern, and we'll follow the mystery of who this is and what they want with Arthur into the next issue. The first bit is the more confusing part for me. The part where Arthur apologizes to the sea life and promises to be there for them. It really feels like author Geoff Johns is trying to answer the question that Waller asked of Aquaman earlier. Just who is Arthur fighting for? He's fighting for the oceans themselves, seems to be the answer. Not humanity or Atlantis, both of whom are flawed. Yes, we saw the sea devils fighting for the oceans, but Dorrance was just as judgmental and bloodthirsty regarding the Atlanteans as the Atlanteans are towards humanity. Both sides of this conflict, even when motivated altruistically, are blinded by their own prejudices and concerns. Both sides have legitimately harmed the other one, and neither of them is willing to forgive. The only truly innocent party in this mix is the sea life within the ocean. The whales that we saw killed have no motivation other than to be alive. They don't seek retribution or revenge for their members killed. They don't judge humanity or the Atlanteans for whatever crimes there are against them, or for the actions taken to help them. There is neither condemnation nor appreciation from the whales or the rest of the sea life. They just are. And they're caught between so many other concerns. This makes a certain degree of sense for somebody like Arthur, because so is he, right? Humans don't want him, the Atlanteans don't want him. He is caught in the middle of their conflicts, doing what he can to help and survive, and just taking damage right now, right? There's also probably a little bit of refuge in siding with sea life, because they don't have an opinion of him either way. In fact, thanks to his telepathy, the sea life is the only group within this kind of quadrangle of power that actually has to listen to Arthur, because he can just go, "Obey me," and they will, where humans and Atlanteans are going to go, "Man, piss off." Even as the king of Atlantis, as someone who has authority over a figure like Merc, we've seen that Merc kinda can be, let's say, discerning about how he obeys his king. But I also can't help but feel like, from a writing perspective, this story move is like a little bit of a cop-out. Just a little bit of a cop-out. Arthur intentionally places himself in between humanity and the Atlanteans. Vaguely, I want to say in this conflict, it's not like open war has been declared. It's almost kind of actually like it's a Cold War, where neither side likes the other side, and they're both going to take actions against each other without the goal being active war. And yet Arthur is refusing to side with either one of them. He's trying to be this impartial third party who favors neither side, and no wonder he feels so out of place in both worlds. No wonder neither side really wants him. He's wishy-washy. He's Charlie Brown. And whether we view this part of Arthur as a flaw or a positive side of him, that he is impartial, that he's not favoring either one of them, I love that it's there. Arthur's greatest challenge isn't the deadliness of Black Manta or the hunger of the trench or the predations of humanity on the ocean. No. His greatest challenge is just being a child of two incredibly different worlds and having to figure out how to reconcile that, both internally and externally, with these challenges. The cover of this issue, drawn by penciler Paul Pelletier, doesn't echo this particular idea, but it does convey how Arthur feels about his new status quo. The cover shows Arthur locked inside of a cage underwater, his face partially obscured by shadows. Now, we have to keep in mind that this cover would have been drawn 3 months before the release of the issue, so that it could be displayed in the previews catalog used by comic stores in order to order the comic book. So this cover has to not only sell this particular issue, but it also needs to keep the status quo coming out of the Thrones of Atlantis kind of vague, so that audiences won't be spoiled by it. Seeing Arthur locked up could mean that he was arrested at the end of the crossover, either by the US government or Atlantis, which is a pretty suspenseful concept. But now that we have read the issue, we see that Arthur isn't physically locked up at all. And you might then think that the cover is misleading. Instead, I propose that it is wholly on point. Arthur is caged by the responsibilities that he has chosen to take on. This issue purposefully demonstrates the corner that Arthur has backed himself into. Friend to no one, with few personal allies, and no comfort. It looks like a fairly plain cover. Like, nothing about this cover is particularly eye-catching, which I hate to say, but it's really how I feel about it. It just looks like an Aquaman cover, but I love the layers of storytelling behind the concept of it. There is something about the coloring in this particular issue that I don't really like. Pelletier's pencils look great. They look solid, as usual. Inked by Sean Parsons with colors by Rod Reis, who's colored almost, I think, all of the rest of Aquaman, and generally speaking, I've really liked his colors, so I'm surprised to be complaining here. Maybe it's that Pelletier's art style is a lot brighter than Ivan Reis's, a little more animated, so that it causes the coloring to look different. The coloring feels murkier, but muddier, like it's less vibrant to me. I'll keep an eye on this as the issues go on, or to see if it shifts or goes away. Is this a me thing, or is this actually a coloring issue? I'm not 100% sure, but going between when I was writing this episode, I was collecting the artwork to post on Breakdown social medias regarding our last episode featuring art from Justice League issue 17 by Ivan Reis and a whole bevy of inkers and 2 colorists, if I remember correctly. And everything in that book looks so crisp. And then I come to this issue, and everything in this book looks not crisp. I'm assuming that Rod Reis is going for a different look with Aquaman, and I just don't know why he's going for a different look from a coloring perspective. But again, I'm going to keep my eye on it, see if I can really pinpoint what it is that's bothering me, because I'm just not sure. Next time, we will be back to covering 2 issues of Aquaman per episode. I just really wanted to take this episode to fully establish Arthur's new status quo before we dove even further into these troubled waters. Tula makes her return, cementing her ongoing role in the comic, and Merc gathers allies for a plot all his own. Meanwhile, an icy figure attacks Mera. This guy says that he needs an army, and he'll find one in the form of her people. Join me in a week for Comic Book Breakdown, episode 26.17 of Aquaman, A Cold Throne. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.